17 cars ahead, 5 red lights glowing above the grid at the Bahrain International Circuit, engine revs held at 13,000 RPM, and then release. Lewis Hamilton doesn't edge forward, he detonates off the line. By the time the pack compresses toward turn 1, he has cleared a Mercedes, sliced past a Red Bull, driven around the outside of a front row rookie, and arrived at the apex leading from 17th on the grid. Behind him, Lando Norris's McLaren is motionless for nearly 10 seconds. George Russell's rear tires snap sideways in a haze of wheel spin. This isn't a race, it's a practice start. But in that violent 3-second window, something fundamental about Formula One changed. Because this wasn't reaction time, it wasn't clutch feel, it wasn't driver magic, it was hardware. And the question now is unavoidable. Did Ferrari just outthink the entire grid before the season even began? What the cameras captured looked absurd. Hamilton lines up on the 9th row, 17th position. Ahead of him, Max Verstappen and Kimi Antonelli on the front row. Behind him, empty asphalt. 5 red lights extinguish. And in less than 50 meters, the Ferrari-powered car is already surging through traffic as if the rest of the field hesitated. He has to swerve right to avoid rear-ending the car in front. That detail matters. It wasn't a clean overtake. It was an avoidance maneuver. Because the closing speed was that dramatic. George Russell's Mercedes struggles for traction. The rear steps out. Norris's McLaren appears frozen for roughly 10 seconds. Meanwhile, Oliver Behrman, also in Ferrari power, describes it as probably the best start of his life. And then it happens again. Morning session, same circuit, same outcome. Hamilton launches so aggressively he must jink right to avoid contact with Russell. The Mercedes crawls, the Ferrari rockets, twice in one day. Identical pattern. Trackside observers describe the Ferrari starts as predictable and repeatable across multiple cars. That is the key phrase, repeatable. This is not a driver phenomenon, it is not a setup quirk, it is not tire temperature variance, it is systemic. When multiple cars powered by the same engine produce the same explosive launch, and rivals repeatedly fail to match it, the cause is not emotional, it is architectural. The gap is visual. Almost uncomfortable. An unnamed rival driver describes it perfectly. Everything seems to be fighting everything else on our car, the Ferraris just launch clean. In Formula One, when a difference looks exaggerated to the naked eye, it usually means something fundamental underneath has shifted. And that is precisely what happened here. Because the real story is not Hamilton's charge from 17th to 1st at turn 1. The real story is what Formula One removed. And which team prepared for that removal before anyone else fully understood its consequence. But to understand that, you have to understand what the sport just lost. And why its absence has rewritten the first 3 seconds of every Grand Prix start. But that wasn't the real story. From 2014 through 2025, every Formula One power unit carried a component called the MGU-H, the motor generator unit, heat. Its function was elegant. It could spin the turbocharger electrically to over 100,000 revolutions per minute before the car even moved. On the grid, engines idled at 9 or 10,000 RPM. The MGU-H silently pre-spooled the turbo to full boost. No lag, no waiting for exhaust energy, no drama. The difference between a good start and a bad one came down to reaction time measured in tenths, not mechanical preparedness measured in seconds. That component is now gone. Without the MGU-H, there is no electric motor to spin the turbo before launch. Drivers must now hold 12 to 13,000 RPM for roughly 10 seconds to generate enough exhaust gas flow to mechanically spool the turbine. 10 seconds. Surrounded by 19 other cars doing the same thing, waiting for 5 red lights to extinguish at a random interval. And here is the critical regulation. The electric motor cannot deploy power until the car reaches 50 kilometers per hour. That means the first phase of the launch, the decisive moment, is pure internal combustion and turbo response, no electrical assistance. Trackside timing observations revealed something subtle but devastating. Valtteri Bottas in a Ferrari-powered Cadillac needed approximately 11 seconds of preparation before launch. Gabriel Bortoleto in an Audi required roughly 13.5 seconds. 2.5 seconds. In a synchronized start, 2.5 seconds of turbo readiness is the difference between wheel spin and traction, between bogging and surge. By the time both cars cross the 50 km/h threshold and electric deployment begins, the Ferrari is already multiple car lengths clear. That explains Hamilton's avoidance maneuver. It explains Norris's stagnation. It explains Russell's snap of over-rotation. The numbers expose the mechanical asymmetry, but numbers alone don't explain why Ferrari was prepared. To understand that, we have to go back 18 months, to a design decision made in Maranello that looked like a compromise at the time. It wasn't. It was foresight. Turbocharging has always involved a trade-off. Large turbo, more peak airflow, more horsepower at high RPM, better performance at circuits like Monza or Spa. Small turbo, quicker response, faster spool, stronger low RPM torque, better drivability. For a decade, the MGU-H erased that trade-off. Teams could run large turbines for maximum power and let the electric motor eliminate lag. With the MGU-H removed, that compromise returned, brutally. 18 months before Bahrain testing, Ferrari's power unit department in Maranello selected a smaller Garrett Motion turbocharger, positioned toward the lower end of regulatory allowances. The compressor outlet diameter can be between 100 and 110 millimeters. The turbine inlet between 95 and 105 millimeters. Ferrari sits toward the bottom of those ranges. Mercedes sits toward the top. The physics is simple but decisive. A smaller turbine wheel has lower rotational inertia. Less spinning mass means less exhaust energy required to accelerate it to operating speed. Without electrical assistance, that difference becomes decisive. Ferrari's choice looked conservative on paper, sacrificing potential peak airflow for response. But when the MGU-H disappeared, response became king. There is another layer. Throughout the hybrid era, Ferrari was the only engine manufacturer that never adopted the split turbo layout pioneered by Mercedes in 2014. While rivals separated compressor and turbine with a long shaft through the V-bank, Ferrari maintained a compact integrated unit. When new regulations limited separation to a maximum of 175 millimeters, effectively banning extreme split layouts, Ferrari did not need to reinvent their architecture. They were already there. Institutional knowledge, packaging familiarity, thermal management understanding. Others had to redesign. Ferrari refined. When the electric safety net disappeared, the team that had quietly preserved compact turbo expertise was suddenly perfectly positioned. The question now shifts. If Ferrari prioritized response, what did Mercedes prioritize? And what does that mean beyond a single practice start? Approximately 12 months before Bahrain testing, Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur raised a concern at an F1 commission meeting. Without the MGU-H, he warned, race starts would become problematic. The room dismissed it. Vasseur did not argue further. He returned to Maranello and confirmed with the FIA that the start procedure would remain unchanged. Then Ferrari committed fully to a turbo design optimized for that exact vulnerability. After Bahrain testing exposed the gap, McLaren's Andrea Stella called for urgent rule changes. Mercedes raised safety concerns over chaotic launches. Vasseur blocked the proposals. His logic was simple. Ferrari had raised the issue a year prior. The regulations were clear. Millions had been invested in compliance. Why alter the rules because rivals misjudged the consequences? The FIA ultimately stated no immediate major regulatory changes were required, though a 5-second blue light warning for drivers at the back of the grid was introduced, but the procedure itself remains intact. Vasseur even delivered a pointed remark when asked about Mercedes' concerns. If you are scared, start from the pit lane. That is not theatrics. That is strategic confidence. Ferrari did not simply engineer a response advantage. They engineered it within stable regulations and ensured those regulations remained stable once the advantage was revealed. In Formula One, foresight is valuable, but foresight combined with political timing is decisive. And yet, every engineering advantage carries cost. Ferrari chose response over brute force. The question is what they sacrificed to gain it. Lewis Hamilton's charge from 17th to 1st at Turn 1 in Bahrain was not spectacle, it was revelation. Formula One removed the MGUH as a cost-saving measure. In doing so, it restored a decade-old engineering compromise. Ferrari saw that compromise returning. They chose response over peak power. They maintained compact architecture while rivals pursued maximum airflow. They confirmed the regulations would remain stable, and when the moment arrived, their cars detonated off the line while others hesitated. This is not about one start. It is about redefining what matters in the first 3 seconds of a Grand Prix. Peak horsepower once ruled the hybrid era. Now, turbo response and drivability may define the opening chapter of every race. Ferrari did not simply build a faster turbo, they built one optimized for the only phase of acceleration where electric assistance is forbidden. And in doing so, they may have reshaped the competitive hierarchy before a single championship point has been awarded.